Chapter 1326 Going to the Rebel Camp. Luodon's cooking made everyone dream about it. A strange red light gradually appeared in the eyes of those believers, as if they had put their whole body and mind into the pot of broth. Yang Xinxin was standing on Zhang Yi's left-hand side. Seeing this, she couldn't help but sigh. "What's wrong?" Zhang Yi asked curiously. Yang Xinxin said, "I have read history. This scene reminds me of Yuan Chonghuan in the late Ming dynasty. At the beginning, he was executed by Emperor Chongzhen for failing to guard the border. When he died, the people below rushed to buy his flesh and blood and stuffed them into their mouths to chew. I was thinking, all history is modern history. I saw the scene with my own eyes, and I know how shocking it is." Zhang Yi took a deep breath and didn't comment on it. In troubled times, human life is worthless, and it has always been like this. After Luodan finished burying all the rebels in the sky, tens of thousands of believers at the scene were each given a bowl of broth. They looked at the broth in their hands with cherishment and drank it greedily. After the rolling hot flow flowed into their throats, the sizzling feeling of oil made them tear up. In their hearts, they were grateful to the monks of Songjia Temple, the funeral master, and the 4 chieftains. Everyone's awe was even stronger. So after they finished drinking the soup, they prostrated themselves on the ground and prostrated themselves to express their gratitude to Songjia Temple. Only Zhang Yi and a few others silently isolated the outside air. Because this soul-stirring taste is delicious to others, but it makes them feel sick and want to vomit. After the sharing of the meat soup was over, Zhang Yi received a message from Liang Yu. They had already left with their people. Zhang Yi looked around and just said to her, "Wait for my news." When the ceremony was over, Deji called the heads of the 3 families over. It seemed that they were going to have a meeting to discuss what happened today. Zhang Yi said to Paji Gaseng, "We have seen the excitement. Next, we will wait for the opening of the gate of the Demon Kingdom. The weather is quite cold, so we will go back. The Chuan Zhao Dharma Assembly will be held for 3 consecutive days, and the various processes in the middle are extremely complicated." Paji Gaseng also held a title in the Tantric Buddhism, so he couldn't leave. He said, "Well, take your time. Stay at home for the next few days to recuperate. If you need anything, just tell us." Zhang Yi nodded and immediately took people away from Songjia Temple. Zhang Yi didn't waste time. After leaving for a distance, he directly opened the space and sent the others back to Paji's house. "You just wait here for a while, I'll be back soon." After Zhang Yi said to them, he immediately opened the dimensional door and shuttled to the direction given by Liang Yu. At this time, Liang Yu and Mu Yan were in a camp of the rebels. Here, they saw the miserable life of the rebels. Compared with the serf camp of the Tusi family, the living conditions here are not better. Everyone also needs to work for survival and contribute their own efforts. The only difference is that here they can live like human beings and no one will whip them. If they are injured, someone will treat them instead of slaughtering them like cattle and sheep. As soon as Bam came back, he was welcomed by everyone. The rebels surrounded Bam with the most sincere admiration in their eyes. As the second in command of the rebels, Bam was the savior of most people here. As the Ypsilon, his every move could easily alarm the funeral master, so most of the tasks on weekdays were done by Bam and his men. "Sister Bam, I'm so glad you're okay." Several little girls shed hot tears in their eyes, rushed to Bam's arms, hugged her, and cried. Bam stroked their heads with a loving face. "In order to save me, many comrades sacrificed," she said in a somewhat painful voice. Everyone's eyes were also a little depressed. This operation, at least hundreds of people were lost, and there were many elite rebels among them. Soon, Bam raised his head. His eyes were sharp, without the slightest self-doubt and hesitation. "However, I will carry their beliefs and continue to overthrow the evil rule of the chieftains. Let the light of peace illuminate the entire snowy plateau." Bam's life alone is more valuable than 1,000 rebels. Although they didn't say it, they knew it very well in their hearts. People are not equal to each other. People with stronger abilities have always been more meaningful in the organization. Bam is not a hypocritical person. She won't say things like, "So many comrades sacrificed their lives to save me. I deserve to die." She will only work harder and bring out her own value, along with the lives of those dead comrades. Only in this way will the sacrifices of those comrades not be wasted. Liang Yu and Jingwei looked at these ragged rebels with hope in their eyes, and they also had some respect in their hearts. A person with such powerful abilities like Bam would be treated preferentially by any force in the southwest region as long as she wanted. She could obviously get everything she wanted, but she chose to take the most difficult path for the justice in her heart. Even if there are thousands of people, I will go. This spirit is worthy of admiration. Liang Yu walked up to Bam and stretched out her right hand. I was in a hurry just now and didn't have time to introduce myself. My name is... When she was about to say her name, Muyan pulled her clothes from behind. Liang Yu then remembered Zhang Yi's instructions and changed her words. You can call me Yi. Bam shook hands with Liang Yu and looked at her sincerely. Thank you very much for your help, Miss Yi. Liang Yu discussed with Mu Yan and gave them some supplies they carried with them. That is, some food, clothes, and fuel. These are all carried by them in case of emergency. Although not too much, they are extremely important resources for the rebels who are struggling to make ends meet. The people here are very happy, and their eyes are full of respect when they look at the two of them. Bam, Zhuoma, it's time to talk about our business. Muyan walked over and said to the two. Bam nodded. Zhuoma has already told me on the way here. Since you helped us as promised, we will also fulfill our promise. Is it convenient to call him over? Muyan looked at the rebels in the camp and asked. Bam nodded. Okay. Now you have our trust. For the rebels, the most important thing is the survival of the alien cadres. They are the fire. As long as they are alive, the flame of the rebels will not be extinguished. Zhang Yi and his men helped them escape from the four chieftains and Songjia Temple. This is the best sincerity and worthy of their trust. Chapter 1327. Facing the Snow Mountain Condor. The Snow Mountain Condor is back. He came to the camp, staggering a little, with blood on the corner of his mouth. Seeing him like this, everyone's faces turned pale with worry, because the Snow Mountain Condor is the foundation of the resistance. If there is any problem with him, the resistance will be finished. Bam and Zhuoma hurriedly walked up to him. Brother Luozhua, are you okay? Snow Mountain Condor Luozhua covered his chest, and a smile appeared on his face under the mask. Hiss, so powerful. As expected of the funeral master of Songjia Temple, he is much stronger than me. He could even laugh out loud at this time. Fortunately, I ran fast and he didn't kill me, ha ha ha. Bam and Zhuoma's faces were very ugly. Did he really kill me? Luozhua shook his head. No, if he really wanted to kill me, I couldn't survive. That guy has practiced Buddhism all his life, and he couldn't even step on an ant to death, so how could he kill me? Bam and Zhuoma breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking of the funeral master, Zhuoma snorted coldly. He can't bear to step on an ant, but he can bear to watch the four Tussi families do whatever they want. What kind of funeral master is this? I really don't know why the previous funeral master designated him as the successor. Bam frowned and scolded Zhuoma. Zhuoma, don't talk nonsense. Every funeral master is the reincarnation of the previous funeral master. Maybe he has his own difficulties. I think he has been deceived by Deji for too long, and sooner or later he will wake up. Zhuoma snorted coldly. Wait for him to wake up. He will fall deeper if he keeps company with jackals all day long. Luozhua smiled and said, Okay, there is nothing wrong with my body. I will be fine after a few days of rest. By the way, I haven't greeted our guests yet. Liang Yu and Muyan came over and met Luozhua. He wore a black mask on his face, which looked quite mysterious, but he sounded very young. It made people want to lift the mask on his face and take a peek at his true appearance. The two greeted Luozhua. Luozhua bowed down seriously to express his gratitude to them. Dear foreign guests, thank you for your help. If you hadn't secretly helped, our rescue operation would not have been so smooth. Liang Yu waved her hand. You're welcome. After all, we also have requests. Luozhua straightened up and smiled frankly. I will meet your boss as promised. But I think this is not the first time we meet. Zhuoma called for medical experts to help Luo Zhua with the treatment. Not long after, Zhang Yi, who had obtained Liang Yu's location, arrived. When he appeared in the mountains, Luo Zhua had already sensed him through the eagles. He did not continue the treatment, but put on his clothes and came to wait outside the crypt. Zhang Yi arrived, and his sudden appearance from the air surprised Luo Zhua a little. Space-related abilities? Zhang Yi looked at the masked snow mountain condor in front of him and asked calmly, "Is that the snow mountain condor?" Luo Zhua nodded and smiled. "Yes, it is me. Thank you for your help. I just don't know what you want to see me for." Liang Yu and others were watching quietly beside them. They consciously did not participate in the conversation between the two bosses. "Let's talk somewhere else," Zhang Yi said. "I like quiet." Many resistance soldiers around were curiously looking at Zhang Yi, which made him uncomfortable. Upon hearing this, Luo Zhua politely invited him to enter the camp. The camp was dark and damp. Although it was daytime, the light was still very dim. Zhang Yi had to turn on the night vision goggles to see everything around him clearly. After a while, they came to the command room. This was one of the few places where people could be entertained. It was a small room with only a table and a few chairs in the middle. A map of the southwest region was hung on the wall, with important locations marked with labels. Zhang Yi found that the places marked with several major chieftain families were all marked with a bright red X. "The conditions here are limited. Please don't be disgusted. Please sit down." Luo Zhua pointed to a chair and said to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi sat down. The door was closed, and there were only two people here. Liang Yu and others were guarding outside to prevent anyone from disturbing them. "Now, can you tell me your purpose? I am willing to believe that you are kind, but you are willing to offend Songjia Temple and the four chieftains in order to help us. This cannot be purely out of your kindness," Luo Zhua said to Zhang Yi with a smile. Zhang Yi could judge that this guy was not very old, maybe even a few years younger than him. But he was very sunny, his voice was crisp and hearty, without the slightest depression, as if his heart was always full of hope. Even in such a harsh and difficult environment, Zhang Yi looked at the man in front of him and actually had a lot of questions in his heart. His understanding of the southwest region basically came from the information provided by Paji Gaseng. But partial listening leads to ignorance, and he will not only listen to one side. Zhang Yi reached out and tapped the wooden table gently, staring at him and asked, "You were able to survive the hands of the Undertaker. That's quite extraordinary. Do you two know each other?" Luo Zhua was about to say something when he heard this, but was interrupted by Zhang Yi. "You can say you don't want to say it, but please don't lie to me. After all, we are risking the entire southwest region to help you, the resistance army, rescue people." Facing Zhang Yi's eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything, Luo Zhua sneered. He nodded. "I do know him, and he is a very familiar person." Zhang Yi nodded. "No wonder," I said. "If he didn't recognize you, even if he didn't kill you, he would catch you and exorcise the demon like he caught Bam. So, how could he let you go?" In this way, everything can be explained. Zhang Yi's eyes flashed with a faint light, and there was a smile on the corner of his mouth. "Since he is an acquaintance, then it will be easy. Now, I want to hear from you, the leader of the rebel army who stands against the four chieftains and Songjia Temple, about the situation in the southwest region. So, this is what you want to know? Okay, I'll tell you everything." Luo Zhua laughed, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. This scene caught Zhang Yi's attention. His teeth were very white and neat, and his speech and behavior were also very good, so he didn't look like a child from an ordinary family. Luo Zhua seemed to like talking very much. He talked endlessly to Zhang Yi about the situation in the southwest region after the end of the world. Most of it was consistent with what Paji Gaseng had said. It was nothing more than the arrival of extreme cold, the disappearance of a large area of the population, the freezing of cattle and sheep, and the mass extinction of species. But later on, there began to be some discrepancies. Chapter 13, 28 Brothers. According to Paji Gaseng, in order to save the snowy plateau, the four Tusi families did their best to build shelters for them, gather people, and provide food and materials for survival. According to Luo Zhua, at the beginning of the end of the world, the four Tusi families first used their influence in the local area to form their own private armies. The four Tusi are the four nobles in the southwest region, including various local institutions, which are also controlled by their people. Therefore, they easily grasp the military and political power. From then on, in the name of convenient management, the materials in the hands of each household were collected. The materials in the hands of merchants, factories, and even individuals were concentrated. Those who lost their materials voluntarily became serfs of the Tusi masters and monks. Luo Zhua said this, gritting his teeth in hatred. They said it very nicely, that everything was for the collective interests of the Snowy Plateau, and that everyone should not only care about the interests of their own families, but learn to contribute to everyone. But in the end, they contributed everything they had to eat, drink, and even their wives, children, and even their lives, and in the end, only the nobles enjoyed it. Zhang Yi listened silently. He was not unfamiliar with these things, as the area where he lived was once the same. What about the burial master? Did he acquiesce to all this, or was he the controller behind the scenes? Zhang Yi was still most concerned about the burial master. After all, that was the existence he feared the most in the entire Snowy Plateau. When mentioning the burial master, Luo Zhua was silent for a long time. Not long after, he suddenly laughed, and that smile was a little strange. It was not a sneer, but a bit helpless. Him? He's just an idealistic idiot. Oh? How do you say it? Tell me in detail. Luo Zhua stopped talking at this time, and stared at Zhang Yi seriously. What you want to know most is actually the news about him, right? Which one of the three people were you that night? Having said that, Zhang Yi was too lazy to lie and told him directly. I was there. He looked at Luo Zhua playfully. That night, the two of you stood together, seemingly hostile, but fighting against the same enemy. So I knew that you two must know each other, and your relationship is not ordinary. Luo Zhua, Zhang Yi's eyes flashed a dark light, staring at him straight, and asked in a deep voice. In fact, you are the person trained by the burial master, right? The so-called resistance army is simply the burial master's own force. Luo Zhua stared at Zhang Yi in surprise, without speaking. Zhang Yi continued, everyone says that the burial master is a pure and flawless white lotus. He has devoted himself to the practice of Buddhism for more than 10 years and enjoys the highest status in Tantric Buddhism. But before the end of the world comes and he becomes an Epsilon-level alien, he has no substantial power. I think he is tired of this, so he sent you to form a resistance army to attack the power of the four major families, so that he can completely become the king of the southwest region. Zhang Yi said while staring at Luo Zhua's eyes, wanting to see how he would react. Luo Zhua asked back, your question is very interesting. If I am really the burial master's man, with the strength of the two of us, we can completely seize everything by force. Why do such a troublesome thing? Zhang Yi said slowly. The burial master's power is not his own, but comes from the tantric initiation ceremony. So, I guess there must be some kind of limit to his power. What's more, he obviously doesn't want a sacred image to be destroyed. Zhang Yi compiled this set of rhetoric, which is a possibility, but the possibility is not very high. The reason for saying this is to test Luo Zhua and draw out his words. Sure enough, Luo Zhua shook his head and laughed. I have to admire your imagination, but what you said is a million miles away from the truth. He and I do know each other, he said seriously, but we are not on the same path. Luo Zhua explained to Zhang Yi, the Tusi system has existed in the Snowy Plateau for thousands of years. In the past 100 years, this system has been abolished. But the nobles have not disappeared, they just changed their names. And the existence of this noble system is supported by Tantric Buddhism. No, just like the head of the Yashalangtai family can become the Tripa of Songjia Temple, it is better to say that Tantric Buddhism itself is a tool in their hands. So, according to the Tantric transaction, Buddhists will not interfere with the secular world. The funeral master is a pedantic guy who is immersed in Buddhist scriptures. He only wants to slowly change the Snowy Plateau, but He will not overthrow the rule of the Tusi family.
As
He said, he clenched his fists tightly, his eyes burning. And I know that this ancient and decadent system has been rotten to the root. That's why I established the resistance army, in order to have a thorough revolution. Zhang Yi heard this and thought for a moment. Then he slowly asked, "Why didn't the Undertaker kill you or capture you?" Luo Zhua smiled. "Do you really want to know the answer?" Zhang Yi nodded. "Of course. Otherwise, why would he bother to help the rebels escape?" "Well, I'll tell you the answer now," he said, reaching for the mask on his face, and then slowly took it off. When he saw that face, Zhang Yi's pupils couldn't help but shrink sharply for a moment. Because he saw the face of the funeral master of Songjia Temple. "You are." Zhang Yi stood up suddenly and subconsciously took a defensive posture. "Don't be nervous, I'm not him. I'm his younger brother," Luo Zhua said lightly. "He and I are twins. He is the older brother and I am the younger brother." Zhang Yi came back to his senses from the shock and took a deep breath. So that's it. No wonder you also have such a strong talent and can become an Epsilon-level alien. No wonder he let you go again and again, so this is the case. Luo Zhua sighed lightly, looking into the distance, as if traveling through time and space. When he was 8 years old, he was taken away by the monks of Songjia Temple, and I haven't seen him since then. Because after becoming the funeral master, he is no longer the son of an ordinary believer, but the master of the cemetery respected by thousands of people. Zhang Yi sat down and sat opposite the face that made him curious. "No matter what, you are brothers. Is it so difficult to sit down and talk together?" "No way." Luo Zhua shook his head. "I've said before, he's an idealist steeped in scriptures. He's hardly ever left Songjia Monastery, and even though he possesses great power, he's never seen the sufferings of the world. Songjia Monastery and the chieftains covered his eyes and blocked his ears, making everything he saw an illusion. So, my dear brother believed their lies and became my biggest enemy in liberating the Southwest region." Chapter 1329 Britannia. Zhang Yi listened to Luo Zhua's narration and thought for a while, with his eyelids drooping. "So, you mean that you and he are enemies?" Zhang Yi asked. Luo Zhua was speechless. He frowned and was silent for a while before he slowly nodded. "If I want to bring peace and tranquility to the snowy plateau, he is my biggest obstacle." Zhang Yi raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, "Since you are enemies, why did you help him that night?" "When looking at a person, it is not what he says but what he does," Luo Zhua explained. "Although I don't like him, he is his brother after all. I can't just watch him die." Zhang Yi asked, "You should know what is under the Great Snow Mountain. You must want to get that thing when you go there. At that time, the funeral master will also become your competitor. With him, I don't think you have any hope of getting it." Luo Zhua's eyes were fixed on Zhang Yi, and he also smiled. "With him here, it's hard for you to get it," Zhang Yi said. "It's just hard for me, but it's not that I don't have a chance. But it's really hard for you. Believe it or not, after the matter under the Great Snow Mountain is settled, the good days of your resistance army will not last long. The reason why the Southwest region can still maintain superficial peace is because the Burial Master and Deji are focusing their energy under the Great Snow Mountain. Once the matter over there is over, they will definitely start to solve all the unstable factors in the Southwest region. At that time, the 3 chieftain families and the resistance army that is against the Songjia Temple will definitely be purged." Luo Zhua said, "So, you hope to cooperate with me to obtain the treasure under the Great Snow Mountain, right?" Zhang Yi smiled faintly. "Although your strength is a little worse, you are also Epsilon after all. If we join forces, the possibility of defeating your brother will increase a lot. The most important thing is that he is the Burial Master's younger brother. The Burial Master has shown mercy to him several times, so Zhang Yi brings him with him to make the Burial Master afraid, which increases the possibility of winning. Think about your comrades. They can't live like mice in the snow all their lives." Zhang Yi turned his head and looked outside. "I believe you are not a soft-hearted guy like your brother. If you want to achieve great things, you have to be decisive," Zhang Yi said, staring into Luo Zhua's eyes. The smile on Luo Zhuo's face disappeared. He stared into Zhang Yi's eyes with an extremely serious expression. If you want to cooperate with me, first you have to tell me who you are. I don't cooperate with people who come from unknown sources. Zhang Yi's body slowly leaned back in the chair. He crossed his arms and after more than 10 seconds, he slowly said, I am from the Jiangnan district, codenamed Chaos. Zhang Yi chose to tell Luo Zhuo his identity. Because the next operation is too difficult to succeed, he must get more help. And Luo Zhuo, himself an Epsilon-level alien, is the younger brother of the funeral master and knows some information that Zhang Yi doesn't know. No matter how you look at it, cooperating with him will increase Zhang Yi's chances of success. After hearing this, Luo Zhuo was surprised and said, I know you. Is it that all the forces in the Jiangnan region are involved this time? Zhang Yi shook his head. No. Only I am involved. It has nothing to do with the region. Luo Zhuo murmured. So that's it. You are a lone wolf. Okay, tell me your choice. Zhang Yi said, if you choose to cooperate, I will help you gain a foothold in the snowy plateau. And I can also provide you with rich supplies. Isn't this exactly what you need now? If you don't cooperate, I will leave immediately. I will no longer care about your affairs. Of course, I am now a mercenary hired by the Pudge family. If you have a conflict with the Pudge family, it is possible that I will take action. Zhang Yi put the interests here so that Luo Zhuo can know whether he should cooperate with him. Luo Zhuo folded his hands. It sounds like I don't have any reason to refuse, and you are an alien from Huashu country, so it doesn't count as colluding with outsiders for me to do this. Zhang Yi keenly found that his words were a bit strange. Wait a minute, you just said you are a foreigner from Huashu country. Have you come into contact with foreigners from other countries? Luo Zhuo smiled and said, didn't you see them all that night? Who are they? Zhang Yi's eyes became sharp. Luo Zhuo said, I don't know the identities of those guys very well. After all, I don't have much information about foreign countries, but they have expressed their own countries. One group came from Bharata next door. Zhang Yi nodded. He guessed correctly. Another group came from Britannia. When Zhang Yi heard the name of this country, he was stunned. What did you say? Britannia? He never thought it would be that country. Because the country is 18,000 miles away from the southwest region, it is the distance of a whole continent. How could they come here? Zhang Yi recalled his understanding of that country. 2 centuries ago, that country was once the most powerful country in the world, known as the Empire on which the sun never sets. Their colonies were all over the world, and the entire Bharata region was once their colony. Today, their Britannia Museum also treasures ancient artifacts from all over the world. Could it be that the artifacts they took away back then mention the information about the Great Snow Mountain? Zhang Yi could only make such a guess. Luo Zhuo said, I refused to cooperate with them. That night, I thought you were the same as them. So, I chose to join forces with Juegua to fight the enemy. Zhang Yi nodded. Your idea is right. So now, our opponent is Juegua. But Bharata and the aliens of Britannia are our enemies. Now, a total of 5 forces are involved, and the relationship between them is quite complicated. Zhang Yi has a headache. He did not bring Yang Xinxin with him, so he did not know how to deal with such a complicated situation. I will check those things when I go back. Now I need you to tell me what the ability of the funeral master is, and what his weaknesses are. Zhang Yi spread his hands. Of course, if I have new information, I will share it with you. Although things are progressing quickly, Zhang Yi's help to the rebels is real, and the rebels now really need help from the outside world. Okay, but you have to provide us with living supplies first. Luo Zhuo made this request, as if he wanted to test Zhang Yi's sincerity. In addition, he didn't think it through, and wanted to delay time. Zhang Yi just smiled faintly. That's easy. He looked around. Do you have a bigger place here? Luo Zhuo's eyes flashed with doubt. Chapter 1330 Tyrant. Let's be friends. Luo Zhuo didn't know what Zhang Yi was going to do at first. Zhang Yi just told him calmly that he was going to give them supplies. Luo Zhuo looked at Zhang Yi, and it didn't seem like he had brought much stuff with him. He rolled his eyes and recalled that when Mu Yan and Liang Yu came, they also gave them a lot of the things they brought with them. How much stuff can you have? Just leave it here for me, he said with a smile. He thought Zhang Yi was making a fuss. Zhang Yi looked at him strangely. Oh, are you sure? Luo Zhua nodded. Yes, I'm sure. Okay. The next moment, a dimensional door appeared in front of Zhang Yi, and then a large amount of supplies poured out like a tide. Luo Zhua was stunned for a moment. Before he could come to his senses, he was washed to the corner by the surging tide of supplies. Zhang Yi quickly retreated to the side. Luo Zhua crawled out of the pile of supplies and looked at the supplies that almost filled the entire room in amazement. Chocolate bread, egg yolk pie, and instant noodles. Wow, this is a boiled egg. Oh my god. Luo Zhua was so surprised that he couldn't close his mouth from ear to ear. He looked at the things here and there. These foods that were everywhere in the supermarket in the past are now extremely expensive. As for how expensive they are, let's put it this way, ordinary people are not qualified to eat them. Only nobles can take them out of the warehouse and enjoy them elegantly. Zhang Yi looked at the leader of the rebels, a young man who was only in his 20s and couldn't help but smile. After all, he was just a half-grown man. Zhang Yi shook his hands and looked around nonchalantly. Oh, this house is indeed a little small. But since he said to put it here, I'll stop. Luo Zhua came back to his senses. He suddenly jumped in front of Zhang Yi and slid to his knees at Zhang Yi's feet. Rich man, let's be friends. Zhang Yi was stunned. Fuck. You are the leader of the resistance army, the Snow Mountain Eagle. Is this really appropriate? Luo Zhua smiled bitterly and hugged Zhang Yi's thigh. What's Snow Mountain Eagle? It's just a name to bluff people. Rich friend, our people are really in need of supplies. Please give more. In order to completely win over Luo Zhua's heart, Zhang Yi would naturally not give only this little supply. He said, You get up first. I said I won't treat you badly. As long as you cooperate with me well, there will be more supplies in the future. Luo Zhua stood up and sighed. Seeing you people from Jiangnan, I know what a rich life is. Jiangnan is really good. There is no shortage of supplies, and people can eat enough. His eyes were full of envy. Zhang Yi thought about it and said to him, Find me a bigger house. Luo Zhua excitedly pulled Zhang Yi and came to their largest place, which was a cave, which seemed to be used for gatherings on weekdays. Zhang Yi frowned. You are so rude. But he still opened the dimensional door and gave Luo Zhua dozens of cubic meters of supplies from the other space. For his inventory, these supplies are just a drop in the bucket. In fact, now in the Jiangnan region, Blizzard City has begun to resume production. Daily food can be produced normally, but there are not so many varieties. Even in Tianhai City, Qingpu Base, with Li Jian's crop cultivation, a large amount of grain has begun to be made into biscuits, bread, and other foods that are easy to store. Luo Zhua's excited face became even redder. Zhang Yi stood beside him and saw his sincere smile. He couldn't help but think of the funeral master Juegua, who had a very innocent smile. Mr. Chaos, thank you very much. You are our savior. With these foods, our food problem for the next half-month can be solved, Luo Zhua said to Zhang Yi sincerely. Zhang Yi said calmly, You don't need to be too polite to me. I'm just following the principle of cooperation. Then, you should tell me what I want to know. Luo Zhua nodded. Okay, I will tell you all the information I know. He talked with Zhang Yi for a long time and told Zhang Yi everything he knew, including Juegua's temperament when he was a child and his various changes later. Zhang Yi listened and recorded it with a device. After returning, he and Yang Xinxin will analyze it carefully to come up with a way to deal with the funeral master. However, just after listening to this, combined with Zhang Yi's previous understanding of the funeral master, he has already had some ideas in his mind, which need to be improved later. After the conversation ended, Zhang Yi glanced at the time. It was not early. He couldn't stay here for too long, lest the Paji family notice something wrong. After exchanging communication methods with Luo Zhua, he planned to leave. But before leaving, he seemed to think of something and asked casually. Oh, by the way, the day I first came to the snow region, a woman committed suicide in front of my door. Is she one of yours? Luo Zhua's eyes flashed with a dark look. He closed his eyes and nodded sadly. Her name is Gesang Meiduo. Zhang Yi said lightly. My condolences. Luo Zhua clenched his fists and said to Zhang Yi, in this world, there is no change without bloodshed. Everyone in our resistance army, including myself, has long been prepared to sacrifice. In order to launch a revolution in the entire snowy plateau, they have arranged undercovers in the 4 major families and even Songjia Temple. No, rather than undercovers, it is better to say that they have instigated some people to rebel. As undercovers, they all have the will to die and hate the chieftain and Songjia Temple to the extreme. The explosion of the Chuanzhao Dharma Assembly was arranged by the undercover. And there are still some people like Gesang Meiduo in the 4 major families and Songjia Temple. Originally, Gesang Meiduo took the initiative to approach Zhang Yi and tried to get important information from him. But Zhang Yi rejected her. Then she had no choice but to die. Otherwise, with Paji Gesang's suspicion, he would definitely follow her down afterwards, and then more people in the whole line would be implicated, and it might even endanger the base camp. Zhang Yi left the cave of the base camp under the watchful eyes of Luo Zhua and others. Since Zhang Yi brought a large amount of supplies, everyone looked at him with gratitude. When they were about to leave, a girl with 2 long braids suddenly ran to Zhang Yi, holding a snow-white hatter in her hand. Dear benefactor, thank you for your assistance to us. There were 2 girls following beside, who held the hatta in their hands to Liang Yu and Mu Yan. Zhang Yi smiled, lowered his head, and asked her to wrap the hatta around him. He reached out and touched the girl's head. Live well. In the end times, this is the best blessing. Dear viewers, here we are cross 1330. Thanks for your support. Please like and subscribe.